Beryl is the first hurricane of the Atlantic season.
We're about 15 miles away from our first potential anchorage. We honestly have no idea if it's going to be so packed or it's even going to be safe.
It is already the earliest storm of its strength on record.
Because it's a known hurricane hole. Everybody is probably in there.
It's also the first Category 4 hurricane ever recorded in June.
I don't like this.
Okay guys, Sierra, Billy, and Jetty here from Tula's in the Summer. If you guys watched last week's video, you know we are currently in Grenada, and it has been exactly 1 week since Hurricane Beryl made landfall on Grenada, Carriacou, Petite Martinique, St. Vincent, and the Grenadines. We have had many conversations since then, and we have figured that sharing those conversations is probably super valuable to everybody else. So we're gonna just talk it out about things we could have done differently, things we did right, things we would change, things we've learned. We are completely okay. We walked away with no damage, completely safe. Northern Grenada, Petite Martinique, Carriacou, St. Vincent and the Grenadines did not get as lucky. So if you have any interest in helping the people and the islands around here, you can visit Rise Grenada. Some of our friends have set up an organization to help relief and rebuild efforts. They're amazing people. Local business here on Grenada. That link will be in the description. We're also doing 2 t-shirt campaigns just like we did for the Bahamas, one for the animals of Carriacou. That money will go directly to the Carriacou Animal Hospital, who helps all the dogs on the island, and the other one, the money will go directly to Rise Grenada, which helps the relief and rebuild efforts. So check out all of that stuff. So anyways, back to our conversation.
How about we start, what if we start chronological, like with our kind of chronological experience as we went into this hurricane. Basically, I guess we were in Guadeloupe, right, which is 200 or 300 miles north of Grenada, when we first started this, seeing this storm form. We were already preparing to come to Grenada. According to our insurance, we had to be here by July 1st, so we were anticipating getting here right on July 1st, or honestly, I think we were
a day ahead.
Or no, I think we were thinking that, like, even if we were in Carriacou, like, just north of Grenada, July 1st, or whatever, right around that time, that'd be fine, because we just want to make sure we're in Grenada July 1st or later, just in case a named windstorm forms, so that we would be covered by insurance, right?
Yeah. So we're in Guadeloupe, planning on just doing easy hops, and then all of a sudden a storm pops up. It looks like it's coming directly in between where we are in Grenada.
I mean, it only started as like a 20% chance of development into even a tropical depression, I believe.
Yeah, and that's what still blows my mind. It's 2024, and between a period of about 3 or 4 days,
yeah,
it went from a 20% chance of being anything to a record-breaking Category 4 hurricane.
Beryl is the first hurricane of the Atlantic season. Also the first Category 4 hurricane ever recorded in June.
Big early hurricane in hurricane season.
So we were in Guadeloupe. We saw that form. Checked the weather multiple times. We were in like northern Guadeloupe at that point. Then we moved to like La Saintes area, and that 20% chance went to a 40, 60, 90% chance within a day.
By the time we were leaving La Saintes, I think it was like an 80 or 90% chance of forming into like at least something, at least tropical depression, tropical storm. But the trend was to get stronger and stronger.
Yeah, so we called insurance because we didn't know, is it smarter to go to Grenada and be south, or stay where we are? And our thoughts at that point were, the history shows that the majority of the storms in this area will go north.
Even though the track of this storm was trending straight west, maybe slightly west-northwest. Yeah, the trends are that they kind of curve north always. Yeah, and we knew that if we were in Grenada July 1st, at least we would be covered by insurance. And we just paid a $12,000 insurance premium.
To be covered. And the day we need to be there is the day this storm is supposed to be hitting these areas.
Yeah, July 1st, the day, yep. And so, like, that was kind of a big decision, right? Like, because a lot of our friends were going to or staying in Guadeloupe or north.
Yeah, so it did take a couple days, but we did get approval to stay in Guadeloupe. It was going to be an extra $358 or something.
Yeah, an extra $400 rider.
On top of our $12,000 premium, which
And
still has a huge deductible on any named or numbered windstorm.
Honestly, like, so $400 rider to be covered in Guadeloupe, but I feel like it was still a 50-50 shot of,
Where
like,
that storm was going.
well, of what is our best decision. I feel like it was still a 50-50. Is our best decision to stay in Guadeloupe or to go to Grenada? Everything else being equal. And then for insurance to cover, you know, for it to cost an extra $400, you know, if it was a sure thing to stay in Guadeloupe and that we knew that storms tracked for sure and it wasn't going to curve north, then I think we would have done that. It would have been the safest bet. It would have been way cheaper than being covered in Grenada but then having the storm hit and having to pay a freaking crazy deductible in case like anything major got damaged on the boat.
So the things that affected us in that decision were, at that point, the storm was still going right in between Guadeloupe and Grenada. There weren't many or any, like, hurricane holes in Guadeloupe that we found.
That was a big thing. Yeah, I think we had a few little spots we were eyeing. I think we could have found some places, but yeah, not like any great 360-degree protection, like with mangroves all around.
And with the way that the storm was moving, and if it did move any more north, and Guadeloupe would have been on the northern part of that storm, which is the part of the storm with the most wind, right? And the most danger.
Yeah, because...
And the strongest side of the hurricane is what we as meteorologists refer to as the right front quadrant, or simply put, the right front side of the hurricane.
That is the wind direction where the storm is moving with the prevailing winds. So it just kind of multiplies itself. Plus, that also creates like some crazy storm surges as well. I think it's that the top side and the right side of the storm is what makes really big and storm surges. So storm surge is like, you know, just extra water level height, like up to 10, 15, 20 foot above normal water level.
So with all of that taken into consideration, and the fact that the storm was still not headed towards Grenada, it was still going north of Grenada, we figured making the jump to Grenada would be our best bet. So we made that decision, and we had to go for it because we only had 2.5 days.
And we were crossing in front of the path of the storm.
Directly in front of the path of the storm. At that point, it was a tropical storm when we left. And by that afternoon, it was a Category 1. By the next morning, it was a Category 2.
Still a little ways away, but yeah, definitely just growing bigger. And the track kind of, I guess as we were sailing south, the track of the storm also was actually shifting a little bit south. So instead of it forecasted to be hitting, I guess the general trend of it through our whole sail down to Grenada was, instead of the storm track hitting like Martinique, St. Lucia, like in between there, it actually tracked down to St. Vincent lower. So by the time we got to Grenada, it was actually forecasted to hit like southern St. Vincent.
And at that point, we had already made that decision. We didn't take the rider for the insurance, so we already started going.
And I also know, I don't know if you had this in mind, but like one of the things I had in mind is like hesitation. This is what I learned so I played rugby in college for one season, because then when I transferred they didn't have rugby. But the thing that the guys would always say like is like, don't hesitate in rugby. Like, so like make a decision of what you're gonna do, whether it's run the ball or kick the ball or pass the ball or whatever, and don't hesitate, just go for it, because hesitating is the worst thing that you could do. But I think like I've always kept that in mind, and in a lot of what we do, and I think like I had that in mind with this as well, because I could see a situation where like you hesitate and you second guess yourself constantly, and unless there's a really good reason to do that, I could see people getting stuck in like limbo, like going back and forth with their decision rather than sticking with the decision and carrying through with it. But I think that there's also another side to that where you can be stubborn like I am and sticking with the decision
Could put you in really big trouble.
stubbornly could put you in big trouble.
I totally agree with make a plan, go with it, but also be paying attention to everything else that's going on, because storms do crazy things. Like this one, it's record breaking. Never happened at this point in this time of year before. That storm could have done crazy things and sped up a lot. It could have, and we would have been out there. We had internet mostly, however, issues with our Starlink. If that storm sped up and we got stuck in St. Vincent or any of the Grenadines, none of those places have a super good hurricane hole. St. Lucia does. So if something sped up, we had an out. We could have.
Where was a hurricane hole in St. Lucia?
Marigot Bay or something?
Marigot in the marina there?
Yeah, that's like, no, I think I will put over if I'm incorrect, but yeah, St. Lucia is known for having a very protected place for hurricanes. So if that storm sped up and instead of going straight into the storm, yes, we would have stopped, backed up, and stopped there. We wouldn't have been covered by insurance, but it's better than putting our life in danger sailing into a Category 4 hurricane. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I think the more likely alternative it would have been to turn around and go back to Guadeloupe.
But we're talking about this speeding up, and it's big. It's covering multiple islands.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't really thought out that scenario and like how much it would speed up or whatever. I don't know what the potential of these things to speed up is. Like, can they go suddenly double? Like, I think it was traveling at 20 or 25 knots.
Could it go 44 maybe?
I don't know. I don't know what the potential is.
I mean, it went from Category 1 to Category 5 within a day and a half.
Okay, but anyway, so we made a decision and we stuck with it.
Well, I think the important thing about that kind of thing is to have a plan, have a very thought out plan, but maybe daily or twice a day reassess that plan. And we weren't really necessarily doing this together, but I was constantly doing it in my own head. And we were talking about it a little bit. But reassess that plan as things change, and then just make sure that you're making the right decision based on the circumstances. And I think in more or less we were doing that, right? Would you say?
Yeah, I think one thing we could have done differently is, so we did, we still had enough time to not do straight overnight from Guadeloupe straight to Grenada. We stopped one night in Martinique. I don't think we should have done that, and I kind of knew that from the beginning because the storm was so big. Those bands were kind of moving so wide, I don't even know how to say it, but storms were coming the day and the evening of us sailing. Squalls. And it made it, you probably did totally fine, but I was so stressed. We were reefing, we were unreefing. There was these bands, it was rainy, it was cloudy, you couldn't see whether the storm was gonna like come at you or whatever, and at night it's very hard to see squalls. We don't have radar. Our internet wasn't functioning totally properly. A lot of squalls you can't see on our phone radar. So it made it very, 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 very stressful for me, because I'm not the most confident sailor. So when you're already racing in front of a hurricane, and then you're dealing with squall after squall after squall, it is emotionally and physically and mentally absolutely exhausting. And it amplifies that fear that I at least already have. So we shouldn't have spent the night in Martinique, and we should have just gone. However, if we did that, there might not have been any room in Grenada in the hurricane hole we were in, because our day delayed allowed a lot of the boats that were in that hurricane hole to leave and go to Trinidad, because a lot of people changed their mind.
Right. So, just to clarify, we did have some buffer in timing in getting to Grenada, getting tucked into this hurricane hole before the storm arrived, like at least that evening before the storm arrived.
Which is not a buffer I like. I like
Right.
plenty of time.
So fine, like, yeah, maybe instead of resting those few hours, should have just kept going nonstop. But
Which would have prevented us from sailing in the weather that we were sailing in, because that night before
little
there
bit.
were no squalls.
yeah, I guess. I mean, maybe we got caught a little bit by the squalls. But, I mean,
We personally don't like sailing doing overnights. We just don't. We like easy day hops. The Caribbean is perfect for that because all the islands are close enough. But yeah, we just...
and also to clarify, like, the hardest part about those squalls, just in a technical sailing sense, is, yeah, just kind of seeing them coming, taking the sails down, or reefing before you get blasted by a significant amount of wind. In all fairness, though, I didn't see more than, like, 25 knots.
Oh, I saw 35. And at that point, we did do an overnight,
happened overnight. Luckily, Billy took a longer shift than I did, but the next
I
day
couldn't sleep because you kept.
he needed to sleep, but these squalls kept coming, and I am not completely self-sufficient on reefing during squalls. I'm not. I even tried a couple times, and it would get stuck because, like, most of the time when we're sailing, we have an electric winch, which is absolutely amazing, game changer for us. We've never had one before. However, it's not quite fast enough to get the mainsail off of our lazy jacks in time when it's rough and the boat's bouncing around. It gets stuck a lot. So most of the time, one of us is going up there and moving the lazy jack out of the way.
Yeah, but that's not from reefing though, because that's just from pulling the mainsail all the way down.
And then having to put
it back up, right? Because if you put in even our deepest reef, our third reef, you still wouldn't have to worry about the lazy jacks.
I guess I'm
when you
talking
put it
about-
back up.
Yeah, we dropped it, putting it back up by myself.
Yeah. Well, you were certainly getting more stressed the whole time.
Yes, I was getting more stressed. Number one, because we changed our Starlink plan about a month ago to be the Priority Mobile, which gives you 50 gigabytes offshore. We did that for a Marseille from the Bahamas down to the USVI, so we had weather and radar and all of this stuff on our phone. However, I didn't realize that 50 priority gets used first. So I thought we were going to have internet offshore. However, we had used that priority when we were anchored off of Guadeloupe or whatever, and we go offshore, and I had no idea, but we had no internet. So,
Yeah.
like, I'm stressed that I can't see what's happening. Then we finally get a little glimpse.
Because, again, just to clarify, you were using that internet to see... We don't have radar on the boat.
Yeah, we were using that internet to see wind and the hurricane path and the radar. And we'd go out of internet, then we'd come back in internet, and all of a sudden it went from category 1 to category 3. And then it went from category 3 to category 4. So the more these squalls are coming, the more I'm getting little snippets of what's going on with the hurricane, and I'm just getting more and more and more stress. There were multiple, like, panic attacks that happened on that trip.
Your stress was starting to affect your
Everything.
ability.
Absolutely everything. That is why I'm not a last minute person. I do not do well in last minute situations, and I certainly don't do well in general when it's rough at night or when there's storms at night, and I know that.
Do you think that there's anything that, besides, I mean, obviously, again, we could have skipped that night of rest and gone a little faster and had a little more of a buffer, but, like, is there anything you think that we could do so that that kind of stress doesn't affect your... Because it was affecting things that you really do definitely know how to do, and it wasn't allowing you to do them.
No,
Like-
I know. I'm totally in agreement with that. And then I get really, really hard on myself when I know that I can do these things, or I'm upset with myself that I can't physically do them in the moment, and then I have to wake you up when I know you're exhausted, and that makes me angry on top of being scared and on top of being stressed.
Do you think there's anything we could do to...
Yeah,
change
I
that?
think we need to have a hits the fan day and just go out there and make me reef and do all this stuff by myself when it is calm and easy and not stressful. And do it a million times. We just need to do that.
I think that's the
And-
biggest thing, is just practice. And yeah, I guess you could set up a scenario where whatever, it's calm or whatever it is, and you just say, oh, gotta reef now, go ahead, reef now, and just set up different scenarios.
And 1000%, I get why the majority of insurances want you below or above that line by June 1st. Sorry, July 1st, now we know it's late. I don't want to be in this situation again.
It's all statistics, but yeah, definitely.
So we were just pushing it too close because we wanted to spend a lot of time in the places that we love. But yeah.
Yeah, because we knew we were going to spend so much time here and below the hurricane belt that we want to just kind of maximize our time inside the hurricane belt while we were able to.
But technically, hurricane season starts every single year June 1st. So for the future.
And some insurance require you to be south or north of the belt by June 1st. Sometimes it's June 15th. And in our case this year, it was July 1st, which it's good, but also, I guess, in this case, kind of bad because...
I think from now on, we're aiming for that June 1st deadline.
So we got to Grenada the morning, like basically 24 hours before the storm.
Only
only 24 hours before a Category 4 storm.
And by that point, the storm was tracking directly to southern St. Vincent, or maybe some paths were calling it right between Grenada and St. Vincent.
We were in a hurricane.
We were in the cone.
Yeah, we were in whichever's worse, the watch or the warning. We were in the warning.
Yeah. And on our way down, like, I already had the spot, Egmont Harbor, where we were in. Like, I already knew about that spot. We actually, I don't know if you were with me last time, 5 years ago when we were in Grenada. I scouted out with the dinghy. I think you were with me.
I thought we spent a night there.
No, we didn't bring the big boat there, but we definitely scouted it out with the dinghy, and we're like, all right, this is the Hurricane Hole, this is where people come. It was empty at the time.
Because it is I think it's one of the most well-protected hurricane holes in all of the Caribbean.
Right, it's probably only 100 or 200 yards. It's probably like 200 yards in one direction, 200 or 300 yards in one direction, and then like 100 yards in the other direction, all surrounded by like mostly high land and mangroves and a few houses with small docks, but mostly mangroves.
But because it is so well known and so protected, that is where everybody goes. And guys, Grenada is the place where pretty much everyone that lives and cruises on their boat brings their boat for hurricane season. So there are so many boats here.
In the Caribbean, it's either Grenada. I mean, there's a few spots, but yeah, Grenada is one of the most popular for sure.
And there are so many boats and not very many other protected spots to go. So we were getting messages from people saying, guys, it's filled. Like, there's a lot of people here. If you get here soon, there's a spot. If you don't, I don't know what you're going to do. So you had other spots picked out just in case.
Yeah, I was eyeing some other spots because I knew that spot was getting filled, was going to get filled. That's the most well-known. So I was scouting out some other spots just on our charts and satellite view. And I had a few more in my mind, but I wasn't positive. They were much smaller spots, like only could fit like 1, 2, 3 boats or something.
And not as well protected from the looks of it.
Maybe, I don't know. I thought they might have been just as well protected, maybe just not by as high of land, but it seemed like there was still 360-degree protection. But I just wasn't sure. Like, they were a little bit trickier to get into, and if anyone else knew about them, I wasn't sure if they were going to be completely full already. So I guess we kind of had some backups, but very unsure about the backups.
And at that point, the storm did do another shift south. And when it did, a lot of the boats in Egmont, in Grenada, flocked out of here. They went to Trinidad.
Right, which is another 80 miles south of us.
And we considered that. However,
by the time we got to Grenada, it was 24 hours before the storm was supposed to arrive already.
We only had less than half a tank of fuel left. Trinidad is still almost 100 miles away. Storm is growing, just another shift south. Trinidad is still in a tropical storm watch, and we don't move all that fast. We're not a powerboat where we can just floor it. Like, we're still sailing, we're still dependent on our engines, which we had just ran out of fuel the week before, so going without a full tank, like, is also a huge stressor, knowing that when it gets lower and lower, it's not as accurate.
But that morning, a ton of other boats from Grenada did leave to go to Trinidad, and I think, and we decided not to. We decided because we got there around midday, right?
And there were so many other factors that could have come into play that could have put us in a bad situation. Again,
right.
It could have sped up. Again, we could have had engine problems. I was doing a little bit of research, and someone can correct me, but from what I've read, when a storm grows and grows and keeps moving, it can kind of suck the wind out and put it into itself. So in front of the storm, which is where we were, can lose its wind. And if we lost wind...
So on the left side and on the bottom of the storm, in theory, it would cancel out the normal trade winds that we normally have. But I don't know if the forecast would take that into... I think the forecast would have taken that into consideration, which it did seem like, because like that whole day we still had that trade wind breeze. So I think the forecast would reflect mostly what the accurate wind was going to be.
Well, anyways, it's still... I didn't like that, knowing that there were so many factors that could come into play that could potentially leave us in open water with a giant Category 4 hurricane that could have moved even more south.
I think we decided, like, if it
was the day before, we would have gone.
Or what if it was that early that morning? Like, if we were in Grenada, super early first light that morning and we could have hopped off first light, I think I would have considered. I don't know what your thoughts are.
Maybe, but the 24 hours before it took us 24 hours to go 100 miles. We were less than 24 hours from when the storm was supposed to hit. We still had more than 80 miles to go.
I don't know if that's correct, but
It is.
how did it take us? Because we were just sailing so slow.
Yeah,
we were trying to sail.
We were going so slow.
Because honestly, we can sail. Well, I don't think fuel. I mean, fuel was a little bit of a concern because we didn't have a full tank like coming to Grenada, but we also.
During a lot of these squalls, we like triple reefed or took the whole sail down.
Well, I'm trying to say why didn't we just motor the whole time we were going slow? And I think we can sail just as fast or faster if we have the wind, which is why we were trying to sail. But as soon as we lose the wind, like in these squalls when we had to take the sails down, or right after the squalls when there's no wind, we're just going slow.
And we wouldn't have had enough fuel to go from Guadeloupe to Grenada.
Right.
We
so
wouldn't
we're
have
also trying
had
to
enough
sail,
fuel. Yeah.
yeah.
So that's why we were.
Well, anyway, yeah, like while a lot of people were sailing down to Trinidad that day, we felt like it was cutting it a little too close. Our best bet was still to hunker down in Grenada. And because all those people left, it did open up some spots for us in Egmont to get in there and secure ourselves.
Yes.
Because I guess even at that point, I was still looking at my backup locations because I just liked the idea of those better. But again, they were not a sure thing. So we could have spent a couple hours getting back into one of those other bays and
And at this point, it's already 1 p.m. So.
Yeah, noon, 1 p.m., whatever it was. So, we were afraid that if we went back and explored those other options and they didn't work out and then we backtracked to Egmont, there would be no room left for us because, again, it was getting tight. There wasn't much room anyway. So we decided just to go back in Egmont where everyone else was and hunker down. So that's what we did. We got up in there. We found a little spot in the corner. I think our boat neighbors didn't like that we
At first, yeah.
went right next to them at first, but they said we were a little close. I said, "Oh no, don't worry, we're gonna move over a little bit," which we did. I think we were.
No, there was plenty. There was
plenty
way
around.
more space between us than them than anyone else in that entire.
And honestly, they if it wasn't us in that location, so the morning of the storm, I guess we'll get into this, but 5 charter boats came down from St. Vincent, and
It was a good thing we were their neighbors and not someone else.
yeah, because these guys were so unprepared, and they probably would have hit this boat.
Okay, so go into why you picked that spot. Because there were a couple other spots we could have picked. Why did you pick that one? But I guess describe the spot first.
Well, I guess it was all the way on the north side of the harbor, and it was right next to a bridge, which isn't ideal, but whether it's a bridge on one side of you or a boat on one side of you, it's something hard you're going to hit. At least you're going to damage our own boat, but you're not going to damage someone else's boat.
And it was a cement bridge. It didn't look like a bridge that would just fall apart.
Yeah. So I guess I knew that the wind was going to come strong out of the north to begin with, so I think we were most protected from the beginning of the storm when we were tucked up in there, but I knew the wind was also going to shift around from the northwest, then west, then southwest, and still be pretty strong through the west and southwest. So at least we were protected mostly from the west, and then when it shifted from the southwest, I knew we were a little bit of exposed just from the fetch across the harbor, but we had our strongest anchor out that way. And the way we should describe how we set up the boat. How we set up the boat, which is how most people in there set up their boat, which is we dropped our main anchor way out front in front of us, and then we just backed the boat up into the mangroves. And then, long story short, we ended up tying 5 lines into the mangroves. Deep, at least 1 foot in diameter trunks of these mangroves.
So this is where some people can get into some trouble because they say tie to the mangroves, but if you don't tie well to the mangroves, you're not in a good situation. So,
or if you tied it too weak of mangroves.
yeah, they say look for a trunk that's at least as thick as your thigh and try to get to the roots and everything. And if you can, do multiple trunks.
Which I think I did in a lot of cases. So we had our main anchor out front, ended up having 5 lines back into the mangroves at really wide angles. That's for some of the widest ones. And then we even had our spare anchor out the front as well at like, I don't know, maybe a 45 or 60 degree angle to the front anchor. So I think the important thing, like when setting that up, is just to think about all scenarios and understand how the wind is going to clock, and understand, okay, what if, like I hate what ifs. You like what ifs.
And this is where Billy is like really, really good at all this stuff. His brain is just constantly going, like thinking about all the things involved, which I don't have that skill. And you can see around the anchorage a lot of other people don't have that skill either, but you're just like always thinking like, how could this affect this? How could this line here help you in this situation?
Because none of these things are like sure things, especially anchors out the front, even though we had our big Mantis M2 out front and then our spare. And our Mantis is on all chain, and our spare is on all line. But at least we had a lot of road. We have like over 200 feet of road, which we put it all out. But it's still not a sure thing. Like, you don't know if they could still drag, they could still get fouled.
And it's not like we're in clear Bahama water where we could see everything. It's brown, mucky. You don't know what's on the bottom. Like, it is mud, but there could be other stuff in there that you could snag on.
So basically, just like that's what I was just thinking about constantly while I was tying up these lines and everything. Just, all right, if this anchor fails, if this anchor drags, what's going to happen? If this line breaks or this mangrove rips out, what's going to happen? And basically, we pretty much had a setup where like at least 2, but most of the time 3 things would have to fail before we like had anything catastrophic. Like, most of the time it was, all right, if our 2 anchors drag, the worst that was going to happen was we're just going to get pushed into the mangroves. Like, our 5 lines was going to hold us into the mangroves. We didn't have enough swing room to swing into the bridge or our other boat neighbor. So at least with what we could control, the worst that was going to happen, given the relatively mild winds, like, you know, less than 80 knots that we were expecting, we would just go into the mangroves, maybe get scratched up a little bit, whatever.
So we started this saying that we were going to tell you what we've learned and everything. So one thing we've learned for sure doing all this, we need more lines. Because we were using everything we could find. We used our Dyneema, that like our super, super skinny Dyneema. We used our dinghy anchor line. We used a spare halyard. Like, we used every single dock line we had on the boat. But like our dinghy anchor line and our thin Dyneema was definitely not what we would have preferred.
Yeah, and it's a hard balance on a catamaran, right? Because, like, I mean, this boat's not super weight sensitive, but other boats are, and you really could load down your catamaran with like just a ton of stuff. So it's always a balance of how much spares and how much stuff you hopefully never have to use, but could be useful. I mean, honestly, what you could do is, if you got here early enough, you could have just bought the spool of 3/4 inch 3-strand nylon line from one of the stores here the day or 2 before.
Yeah, comes all back in to give yourself plenty of time to deal with this crap.
So like that would have been ideal to have like a few hundred feet of just 3/4 inch 3-strand nylon. To be able to tie up into the mangroves. But something for people to think about, and for us to think about, we have a spare halyard on board, so like in case our mainsail or any of our halyards break, we have a spare one on board, and that's one that we use. And maybe it's not the most ideal line because it's Dyneema core, so it doesn't stretch, but honestly there was plenty of stretch with like
the way the mangroves move.
The stretch in the mangroves and the length of the line, it still had a little bit of stretch in there, and like stuff like that. So that wasn't a big deal. So like if you're thinking about having a spare halyard or 2, it for sure is could be used as, you know, they're long enough where they can be used as, especially because this halyard would be a 2-to-1 halyard, so that's like an extra, that's double the length of like what a normal halyard would be. So not only is it good to have a spare halyard on board, but you could use it for something like this.
So ideally we would have, still used that spare halyard, but instead of the dinghy anchor line and the Dyneema, super skinny Dyneema, we would have had 2 more of our nice thick dock lines.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah, it's the long ones.
The ones that are like double the length of your boat.
I mean, we controlled everything that we could control, but this leads us into what are the biggest risks of the storm. And it also leads us back into why I was eyeing those other spots so much and really kind of wanted to, I don't know, explore that more. And that is, I think the biggest risk, like, if the winds stay under 80, 100 knots, because I think once, like, we talked to our friends the other day, and their limit was, like, 100 knots. So, like, once you're at 100 knots of wind, like, there's nothing you can do. Like, that thing is just taking over. Like, now you have, especially catamarans or lightweight multi-hulls, like, they can start to get lifted up and flipped over and just heavy flying debris, and just so much more outside of your control. But less than, like, 80 knots, like, in what the conditions we were expecting, I think that the biggest risk, besides what you can control, the biggest risk are other boats.
Yeah, so do you want to pause there and go to what you just brought up? So our friends mentioned 100 knots was their limit. That's when they were leaving the boat.
Like if it was forecasted to be, or ended up being 100 knots.
What are your thoughts on leaving the boat?
Yeah, I agree. Like if it's forecasted to be, I don't know, honestly, you and my freaking mother would call me, and you guys would, and your family and my in-laws would call me and make us leave the boat well before that. But I think 100 knots or 80 to 100 knots, somewhere in there, is a plenty fair number to, I'd leave the boat.
So
sure.
let's talk about leaving the boat. So we
stayed on the boat.
We stayed on the boat. The evening before, we were predicted to get about 50 to 60 knot winds.
That's what I saw. Yeah, I didn't see anything over 60 knots. I saw into the 50 knots max.
The day leading up to when we were like preparing the boat and doing all this work, I really, really, really wanted to book a hotel or book an Airbnb and have it ready in case we wanted to go. And you wanted to wait. And
Well, I just knew like that evening before we'd have a really good idea of what it was gonna.
However, I'm not a last minute person, and things get booked up, and like there aren't all that many options around here anyways. So like I had looked up shelters, I had looked up Airbnbs, and the hard thing about being in a different country, or even if in a different state, I grew up in Florida. I know hurricane codes. I know how houses are built. I know all of that stuff. We're in a different country. We have no idea the codes of their buildings or what their windows or their roofs or anything have to be. And yeah, there's shelters, but what's the code of that shelter's building? And again, if we had plenty of time, I would have looked up all this stuff. And I was trying to, but there just wasn't tons of time because our entire time we had was preparing the boat itself. And then we also.
So your point is,
I didn't know what the better option was: stay on the boat or go. And if you're going, where are we going?
Because you're saying that maybe staying on the boat is even safer than being in some of these buildings on land, because maybe that they're just not strong enough.
Potentially. So that was really hard, making that decision not to book a place. And I had messaged like 4 Airbnbs. 2 of them didn't get back to me whether they were or were not hurricane proof, like with windows and doors and everything. One did get back to me. She was hurricane proof. It was really expensive. She was open. But at that point, some of our friends had an option. I looked up a shelter. There was a shelter, a 15-minute walk. But
we had a number of different options. We had our friend John offer us maybe some of his friends who he has on the island, or our friend Tom messaged us. He said, "Hey, you guys can come stay with us."
But the hard thing about that is, if you wait too long, no one's gonna come. Like, no one's gonna drive and come help you. Like this.
Yeah.
So like waiting too long is also harmful. But that also brings up like the shelter. There's a shelter right over here, but it's really low to the water. Like if you get a storm surge, are you flooded? Like, so that's the thing. That's what I'm going to spend a lot of time on now, because it's only the very beginning of hurricane season. If we have another one comes, what is our on land plan? Because I didn't have one.
So you're gonna spend time on getting an on-land plan.
Yeah, figuring out, is there a hotel that's super safe, if there's an Airbnb that's super safe.
Do you still think? I still don't. The timing of it. I mean, I guess if you're like trying to book something.
Yeah, you have to book.
Yeah.
You have a dog. Like like these islands down here are not super dog friendly. So if we just show up somewhere and we have a dog, they could say, "Sorry, your dog's staying outside." And no offense, but I'm not leaving Jetty outside. I will be out there with her.
Yeah.
And then we're in real trouble.
Agree. But like besides that, the timing really, that wasn't a. I mean, especially after going through this. Besides the booking the places, like would have plenty of time before the storm.
If it didn't speed up.
If it didn't
It
speed
could
up,
have
but
sped
like,
over. It
but
could have
that-
sped up overnight.
yeah, but it's not going to speed up enough where like you didn't have an hour or two in the morning. Like just the way that our timing worked out. You saw how calm it was all morning until it started to slowly pick up, and by that time we could have seen like if the forecast was going to be even close to our limit of what we wanted to stay on the boat. So like I think that with modern technology, I don't know. I don't think it's unreasonable that I wasn't concerned with that timing of actually physically getting off the boat and getting to somewhere.
And at that point, yes, where we are is definitely 100% in the cone. Like, we know we are going to get hit with some part of the hurricane, Category 4 hurricane. From what we were seeing, we weren't going to see anything more than 60, but the tiniest little shift could have put the eye right over us. Literally a 10-mile shift, 20-mile shift.
Yeah.
So that's where that decision of do you stay or do you go, it's a really, really hard decision. You were very adamant about staying. Talked to my dad. My dad was very adamant about us staying. Again, not knowing the building codes. And brother-in-law Brian, captain of the Sportfish, lots of boating experience in between the three of them. They all said stay on the boat, knowing where we were. If we were on a mooring or in a marina or anything like that, I think it would have been a very different story. But knowing that we were in the mangroves, they all said stay on the boat. So that made me feel better. Not that I don't trust Billy and his sole opinion, but just having backups saying, yes, you're doing that right. Because a lot of other people in our anchorage did leave the boat, and that just, like, you don't want to depend on other people's opinions because they could be very, very wrong. But
Yeah, I think
that a lot of people were leaving was like, are we doing the right thing or are we not?
I think that in this lifestyle, in sailing and cruising in general, you got to be very careful about just listening to other people.
For sure, and I think we saw a lot of that when it came to staying or leaving to Trinidad. There were a lot of people going to Trinidad really
Like
late.
last minute, which is...
And I would not have been comfortable doing that, and that's with many, many, many years of experience on the boat. So I think a lot of people just see their neighbors going, and they could be new and be like, oh, I got to go with them. They seem to know what they're doing. People can talk the talk and not have any idea how to walk the walk, so beware.
Yeah, I think you, if you guys are sailing or cruising or whatever, just I think you just gotta learn as much as you can, trust your own instincts.
Know your boat.
Listen, like get opinions, but like really vet those opinions. Like understand who you're talking to and stuff like that. And I think through the years we've done that. We've done all that, and that way you can take all those pieces of information. I easily throw out the trash, untrusted pieces of information and then make an informed decision and you know kind of trust your decision.
And
because you see that a lot with like buddy boating too,
Yeah.
like in general. Like
you can get yourself into some trouble. And I think another thing besides like your opinion and knowing your sources, but also knowing your boat. If you need to know your boat really, really well in order to make a big decision of, hey, I'm leaving in front of a hurricane.
Yeah, because if honestly, like if we were like faster, or I mean,
we would have gone.
Yeah, like if it was because I'm not just saying a faster boat, but I'm saying like a consistently like average, like you know, a lot faster boat. Like yeah, I think it opens up more possibilities and like.
But also, like, we did see some really small boats going really late in the day, and it made me very nervous.
Like 4-knot boats, like small little monohulls.
So just know your boat, know your own skill, take other people's opinions into consideration, but vet them.
So let's get into, because this is one disagreement we had the other day. So I said already that I think, like in our situation, in winds under whatever 100 knots, I think your biggest risk are like things around you, mostly other boats. And
so Billy would prefer, if those other places were safe, he would prefer to be completely by himself.
100%. Because let's set up the scenario. What happened was we got ourselves all secured the day before the storm. Everyone seemed all secured. But then the morning of the storm, 5 boats came into Egmont. They were all from St. Vincent. They were all charter boats, and we learned later on that they were the captains and crew on these boats were just people that were
Wow.
hired at the very last minute to get these boats out of St. Vincent, out of the storm's path. And I think they actually ended up being in Carriacou, and they left Carriacou to get out of the way and come down here. But these boats were... I mean, there was one kid who seemed like he really knew what he was doing.
And we're not saying it's their fault. They didn't know what they were signing up for.
Yeah, I think they were just hired at the last minute. I don't know what these guys' experience was or anything.
And
but
it sounded like the boats had all the boats had either an engine issue, an electronic issue. They all had some sort of issue. So they were struggling.
Just a mess. They were unprepared. They each had one anchor, small anchors, seemingly not enough lines. And it was just crazy. Like they were,
because at that point the anchorage was already, to everyone in that anchorage's opinion, as full as it should have
I mean,
been.
I don't know. I think you could have fit some other more boats in there
If you had more time.
Yeah, if you had.
To securely.
Yeah, if you had more time, the proper people, and the proper like lines and anchors and stuff to secure yourself. But these boats came out the last. It was like a perfect storm. Like the last minute, not experienced crew and not good gear.
So,
And they were just wreaking havoc. It was craziness.
So that's what makes it really hard when you do take a lot of time and attention and do everything you can possibly do to your own boat to see someone come in and honestly go right next to you and know that they have one anchor out and not enough line.
Yeah. And this is just what I'm describing is what happened, but it is like an extreme example. Like I wasn't expecting that, but it is an extreme example to my point, which is what you're saying, which is like you don't know what your neighbor has. Like,
so this is Billy and I's disagreement. I would not prefer to be completely by myself. Billy would prefer to be completely by himself.
Because these other places I was eyeing, they look like they could only handle 1, 2, 3 boats. But even if it was just one boat, room for one boat, we were by ourselves, tucked in the mangroves, tied up, super secure. I 1000% would have taken that over where we were.
And I don't think I would. Honestly, screw the boat. This comes to our life at this point. This is, if you're out there, I know you. I've known you for a very long time.
But let's keep the scenario being under 100 knot winds, because we both agree that if it's forecast to be 100 knots or more, we're not going to be on the boat.
You didn't agree to that a couple days ago.
Well, because a few days ago we were painting a scenario, call it 80 knots. 80 knots of wind. We could paint that scenario. Let's say we're staying on the boat, it's 80 knots of wind, and we're in this isolated spot.
I still would rather at least have someone else around, because you are still out there and you are tweaking constantly, and even though you can't do a lot in 80 knots,
Tweaking as in...
messing with the lines, messing with the anchor, moving things around, like
And not
Billy's
a
a
ton.
doer,
I
a
was
tinkerer.
I
I can always make it better, and you can. You really can. I have full faith that you can.
Okay.
But I do not have full faith that there is not flying debris around that's going to knock you in the head, and now I'm stuck trying to help you and the boat and whatever in a Category 4 hurricane by myself.
But if it's blowing 80 knots and your scenario you're saying is I get hit in the head with a piece of debris,
Yeah.
whether we're by ourselves, which is a bay over,
You're about to eat your words.
by ourselves, which is a bay over from Egmont, where all the other boats were, or whether we're in Egmont, what is being around other people going to do?
Just like we brought this up in a conversation the other night with our friends, and I could hear it on the radio during all this stuff. We only had about 40 knot winds. A couple people did drag, and they were motoring around, and some lines got stuck in props, and you could hear it on the radio. Hey, give it 5 minutes for the wind to die a little bit. I will put my dinghy in the water, and I will come help you.
And that ended up being 5 minutes, and then being 30 minutes. You could hear all this on the radio, and then it ended up being an hour.
No, it didn't.
Yeah.
I could see them. Go help them.
It ended up being longer, but also by that time, the winds died down to like, they were only gusting into 20-something knots.
This is me and my own opinions and emotions. Having people around, and especially the cruiser community, people are so willing to help. Knowing someone is by you that can help you if you get hurt is so important to me.
So go ahead. The scenarios, it's 80 knot, blowing 80 knots. I get in the head. You need help, and what? happens?
Someone comes over and helps. Like, anybody could have more experience
So-
than I have in helping you.
Our friend the other day even said that he would, because my argument is no one's putting their dinghy in the water in 80 knots of wind when debris is flying around to come and help.
And he said,
And
we would help you.
He said he would help.
Yes.
I'll continue to argue that and say it might not be possible to put a dinghy in the water and come. That dinghy might get flipped upside down if someone tries to come help you.
Okay,
in
but
80 knots of wind.
if your skull is cracked, okay, let's put it in Bo and Brandy. If Bo and Brandy are next to us and this happened and Bo got hurt, I will swim over to help Bo. Would you not?
Yeah, sure, I would, but I don't know, because I agree with you. In a perfect world, we would be in that small anchorage, tied up with a couple of our other friends' boats, and have support there. But that's not the scenario we are painting, because I guess we're going to extremes just to kind of argue out.
Because the extremes are what happened 20 miles north of here.
No, well, I'm saying we're talking about whether we'd rather be tied up in a safer spot alone, away from other boats, because my argument is the highest risk of it all in less than 100 knots of wind are other boats. Like, what could go wrong all has to do with other boats. And if you're tied up in a safe spot
And debris.
by yourself, you eliminate so much of that risk. But the only scenario you have against that is me getting hit in the head with debris and having. But I still
Hold
think.
on. Let's have the words come out of your mouth. When we were walking Jetty the other day, what kind of just random debris did we spot?
Yeah.
Cinder blocks, nail boards.
We didn't see that stuff was not flying through the air.
No, because it was only 40 knots. But did we see all of that stuff laying right across on the street, right above all of our boats, right at the dinghy dock?
Yeah. So what does it take to lift that stuff up and throw it?
What does it take to break a lamp pole off the bridge? They were moving.
So that's why, I guess you got to draw your limit, because when that stuff starts to happen, all right, well, that's when you shouldn't be on the boat. Or at least, and I'll stand by this too, if debris like that's flying around, I'm not going to be outside adjusting lines. It is what it is. It's not going to matter as much adjusting lines anyway, because you have less boats around to worry about, and you're in a tighter spot anyway.
I wish I could believe you. I wish I could believe
Love,
that you
if
wouldn't
there
walk
are
outside.
cinder blocks and light posts flying around the air,
But they might
I'm
not.
not going to be outside adjusting lines.
They might not be flying around when you walk out that door, but when you're moving something up there, they might start.
I still so stand by, I'd rather be in a smaller, isolated location with less boats around that are safer
And I'm
than
not
have the physical support of other people right there.
And I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying having the physical support of other people is very, very important to me and helps me do everything because I'm less stressed.
But there's nothing to do at that point. We did what we can do. We're in as safe a spot as we possibly can be. Everything's a trade-off, and I will take those trade-offs any day. I see the value of having people physically around, especially people who will help you, but given what the risks, 100% rather be in a safer spot by ourselves, more secure, less obstructions around us that could compromise us and the boat. And if the winds are high enough where debris is flying around, well, first off, I won't be outside. Maybe that debris would hit the boat, but we'd be inside the boat, unprotected. And if it's going to be more than 100 knots or whatever that wind speed is we decided, we won't be on the boat anyway. So.
And this is just our difference in opinion. I'm not saying you're wrong, I'm not saying I'm right, but feel free to say what you would think.
Because, if it was 60 knot, we only got 45 knot gusts in that harbor.
And did it feel like 45 knot gusts? No, it felt
more
crazy.
Yeah, it did feel. But my point is, if we got 60,
that being 80, because you're saying our limit is 80, it's double of what we just experienced
exactly,
the other
and
day.
3 of those charter boats would have been on top of us. Our boat would have been partially crushed by these boats and pushed into the mangrove. And at that point, even though we did the best we could with our lines, and I said 3 of them would have to fail for us to be able to swing into the bridge. Well, there's a scenario that rips out the mangroves or breaks or chafes because a boat's against our line. One of these charter boats that dragged into our lines, chafing our line. Now it breaks 3 of our lines, and now we're swung into the bridge. Man.
I agree with you. The safest place for the boat is by itself in the mangroves. 1000%. No disagreement there. I would agree that the safest place for the boat would be with nobody else. For my soul, I like other people around.
Well, I mean, I guess it's a feeling thing for you, but I don't think that makes it safer. I think you gotta trust. I think you just gotta trust, like, ourselves, and
I don't trust myself with this. That's the issue.
well,
I do trust you, but you're one person. You can't do everything when everything's going crazy.
yeah, but that's not the part you gotta trust. The part you gotta trust is that we are in a safest spot as we can be, and we did everything we could to prepare. So that's what you gotta trust. There's nothing in 80 knots. There's nothing we can really do to, like, so, like, you don't have to trust yourself doing anything. So, you know what I mean?
Okay, so a lot of people are probably going to bring this up, so let's talk about this. We have seen drone footage from Carriacou where they had, I think, up to 150 knot winds, 120 to 150. I went right over them, and there was at least one catamaran in the mangroves that did fully flip upside down. I
forgot to tell you, I talked to a lady the other day, and her boat flipped upside down, and her friend's boat flipped upside down. She had a Manta 40, and her friend had a bigger, like 50 or 50-something foot cat, and they both flipped upside down.
Okay, so let's talk about that. So, because a lot of people are going to disagree with, stay on the boat. So, and they're going to say, oh, you could flip. Talk about, because you have lots of opinions on that.
I forget what you're referring to exactly, but I think that, well, some precautions, right? Obviously, our anchors and tying into the mangroves, I think that kind of stuff can help the boat from flip. We made sure we had full tanks of water. We made water outside the harbor before we came in. We had full tanks of water. We didn't have a full tank of fuel, but we would have if we had enough time. And, I mean, that's really all you can do to take precaution. And then maybe, if you knew the storm was going to be more significant, we might have gone bow into the mangroves instead of stern to the mangroves.
And you were saying the other day that there were quite a few boats still just on their single anchor in the harbor, and you were saying that they have a lot more chance of flipping because they don't have the mangroves and all of their anchors at different points holding them down, right? Or no?
Yeah, maybe I said that, and I think that's true. I don't know.
Because that goes back to my point of if we're by ourselves and our boat flips.
I think it's a hard unknown. Like, I don't think it's a black and white. Yeah, like, you have a much better chance of flipping if you're on anchor swinging. I think at that point, if there's winds high enough to be able to flip a big cruising catamaran, then there's a lot more problems that are going to happen, especially if you're on anchor, than just solely flipping. Like, I think those anchors are going to drag first off, no matter really what you have, unless you're on, like, a storm mooring or something.
But, like, okay, flip.
But
you don't think we could flip the way that we were?
No, I think it's certainly possible, but I think it's, again, I think that if there's wind strong enough to flip our boat like that, that's going to be over 100 knots, and we're not going to be on the boat anyway. We did everything we could do. There's nothing else you can really do. Like, that's all I can really say about that. I don't know. The only other thing I think, like I said, is stick the bows into the mangroves, and that way the lightest part of the boat is kind of tucked into the mangroves more, maybe held down more a little bit by those lines.
Because that's the other part of stay or go on the boat. Like, if there's any risk of our boat flipping, I don't want to be on the boat.
Yeah, 100%. But that goes hand in hand with that wind speed. Like, is it 100 knots for you? Is it 80 knots? Whatever. It's somewhere around there. But, yeah.
But how do you know in enough time to get off?
I mean, the forecast, like, by that morning, we saw the forecast in the morning. It's relatively accurate. Like, like, things can change, but, like, you have an idea of what the possibilities are.
Except for tornadoes, which pop up in hurricanes all the time.
Maybe, I don't know. But you can only do what you can do, and that's the best we can do, and so I think it's pretty good.
I guess while we're talking about looking at the forecast, put in something that we found over the past 2 weeks. We've been using Windfinder as like our main wind app for a long time, because that's what you always use teaching kiteboarding. From the day that this storm showed
the 20% chance of developing to the moment it went over Grenada, Windfinder was almost exact.
Yeah, Windfinder's always really been. I mean, this is not sponsored or anything. We don't even have the paid version of Windfinder.
Yeah,
it's just the free version.
It's the free version. And guys, I made a reel on Instagram the day that 20% formed, because Windfinder showed it growing right over Grenada where we needed to be, and that was still like way far out. And I got so many messages. What app are you on? I don't see this. What app are you on? And from that first day path, that's pretty much exactly where that storm went the day that it came.
Yeah, and I think it just like these apps are just platforms that are
Posting different weather.
Yeah, displaying the different forecasts, and there's like, I don't know, 10 or 20.
The Euro model, the American model.
Yeah, the GFS, the this and that. And honestly, this stuff is not my strong suit at all. I just know we kind of look at Windfinder. It's always been relatively accurate for us. I think Predict Wind is pretty good, and I think you can look at these different forecasts within these apps.
And I think people did say Windy is great, but you have to have on the right model.
Right, the model. These are different models.
So like whatever Windfinder is for us, it was on it for sure.
But that's not to say, like, if you know anything more than we do, which we don't know much, then you'd be just fine. Like, seeing these different models and predictions and stuff. We should be better at understanding all that. We're not.
I mean, it's not like we were using that as the only source. We used tons of sources to see what was going on, but that's just our main go-to weather app on the daily.
Yeah. Yep. Sure.
What else do we want to talk about? I guess like preparing the boat. We took the head sail down.
Yeah, we took everything you can take down. You should take down. Sierra took all our fishing poles down. They're hanging underneath our hardtop in racks.
We took the surfboards off the racks.
Surfboards off, fishing poles off.
Screecher, jib.
The head sail's down.
We probably should have taken the mainsail down, but we just simply ran out of time. Like, it was dark. We have never taken it.
No, that's no excuse. We could have. I could have. But
technically, in our insurance hurricane prep, it's not required to take it down.
And I saw the forecast, and I don't know. Not something I'm probably, yeah. Could have been more prudent. About half
we strapped it down.
We lashed a bunch of lines around it in a very proper way. We cinched it up tight. I really wasn't worried about, and the mainsail is in its Doyle sail bed, like a stack pack or whatever, and yeah, we just cinched it down real tight with lines. Like, I was not worried at all about it shredding or anything like that, and it adds a little bit of windage to the boat, but just a little. And again, within what we were seeing, I thought it was acceptable. We could have been prudent and taken it down.
And if it had shown any more south, we would have taken it down.
Yeah, or any stronger winds or whatever. But I guess, you could say that the prudent thing to do would have been to take it down. So fine, fair enough.
We took everything else.
Everything was off the boat, or inside the boat rather. Even our cushions we put inside the boat.
Except one thing we did get a little greedy on is we wanted to kind of stay up to date with the weather and our family and friends as long as possible, so we kept our Starlink up as long as possible, and we shouldn't have. We should have taken it down because the mount, at one point I saw the mount get totally turned sideways, and then we were like, we got to get that in. By the time we got it in, it was pouring rain and water got in the connections, and it took Billy a couple days to get it all back together, but he had totally ripped the entire thing apart, figured out how to fix it, and now we're back online.
Yeah, but I kind of knew we were pushing it with that, and I thought worst case scenario it would just break, but and I knew I was going to take it down at some point, but that mount twisted sooner than I thought. So whatever, nothing bad. I was able to fix it. We have Starlink again.
So I guess we kind of skipped over a little bit of the 5 boats that came in last minute. At one point how they wanted to tie up.
I mean, I don't know. At one point they wanted to like drop an anchor right over our anchor. They already dragged in the middle. All right, so these boats came in. They were wreaking havoc. They were trying to tie up in different spots.
Again, not on them. They didn't. I don't think they knew what they signed up for.
Yeah, I'm not. You can't really blame the crew too much. It was the whole thing. It was the company, and these are boats in. the charter program in St. Vincent, and their owner-owned boats, so like privately owned, that they just have them, and then the company hired these people to take them down. So yeah, I'm not really necessarily blaming the people. I think there was one kid who had some experience, and then the rest were pretty inexperienced, it seemed like. And anyway, they were like tying up over Cole and Emily from the Adventure Cruise. If you guys see them on YouTube, they were right across from us. They were like tying up across their lines, and then Cole went out and like helped them redo their setup because one of the cats kept dragging their front anchor.
I looked at one point and there's someone swimming in the water, and I'm like, what is going on? And Cole's like swimming to try to help them.
Help them put the bridle on and stuff like that. So I went over, I lent a hand real quick, and then I went over to the other boat, and they were anchored out in the middle because they tried to tie up a few times and it wasn't working. So they were just on one anchor in the middle of the harbor, and I was like, are you guys going to stay on anchor? And my intention was, because if they weren't going to stay on anchor, I wanted to give them a hand. It was still calm enough to give them a hand.
To give you guys an idea, this is about 1.5 to 2 hours before this Category 4 storm is supposed to make landfall.
Right. So, but they said, no, we're going to stay here on anchor. That's really our only choice. I was like, all right. So, you know, a couple hours later, when the wind starts picking up, they drag over and over again. They're motoring around the harbor. We're watching them. They wanted to like drop. At one point, they wanted to drop their anchor like across our anchor chain, and like tie backwards into the bridge, and they'd be facing exactly where the wind is coming from. And I was like, guys, you're gonna trip my anchor. Like, you've already dragged in the middle of the harbor. Of course, you're gonna drag again, but this time you're across my anchor. You're gonna trip my anchor. And now we're going to drag and go sideways into the mangroves, and you're probably going to be on top of us. So thank goodness they didn't do that, and they went, I don't know what they were doing. I think they were also just motoring around the middle of the harbor while the highest winds were happening.
And it's not easy to, like, do all this stiff jerk. Like, everyone's anxious, and there's a big storm coming, and some people aren't experienced, and there's just a lot going on. So even, like, Billy going out there and being like, you can't, like, that's hard to go tell them, like, I'm not comfortable with you dropping here, when they think that that's their only option. Like,
and I didn't say you can't, but I just tried to explain, because if they can, in reality, they can do what they want. Like, what am I going to actually really do besides, like, yell at them or whatever? But no, I just tried to explain to them, you know, why that wasn't a good idea, and I'm glad that they were receptive to it.
But it is, like, everyone is trying to help each other, but it's still uncomfortable, because even when we kind of pulled in, we knew that our neighbors, like, didn't really like that we were going next to them, even though we had plenty of room and kind of showed that we knew what we were doing. Like, everyone
and it was honestly a better thing for them, because it would have been this boat next to them dragged into them.
Yeah, but like, you don't know when people are coming in, you don't know their skill. You just took a lot of your time prepping your boat, and then someone else might come, you know? It's just, there's lots of parts moving, emotions, stress, all going on at the same time.
And we would have been better off in our tight little harbor by ourselves.
I like being around people.
You could talk to them on the VHL.
Oh God, no. Oh, never ever in a million years would I ever want to be on a mooring ball.
Oh my God.
In these South Bays during a storm, man.
Yeah, there were some boats.
A lot of boats.
A lot of boats. Like in some of these bays, even in off of Grand Anse, like on moorings, maybe on their own anchor. I don't know. But we were motoring by the morning before the storm, like the day before.
So rough.
Yeah, we couldn't believe that all these boats were still there. And I guess and the only reason that's acceptable in my mind was that maybe these boats were covered by insurance. This was their hurricane plan. It was approved, and they weren't on the boat.
And it doesn't matter.
And I guess, fine, fair enough. Like, even if, I mean, the boats are just going to get...
Here, where there was not much issues going on, there was, I think, 3 boats that broke off moorings and ended up on the beach.
Yeah, so I guess best case scenario is just really rough out there for the boat, but it's fine. Worst case scenario, it like sinks or breaks off their mooring and drags onto the beach. But I don't know, maybe they're covered by insurance and it's whatever to them. So I guess maybe those are some of the reasons that those boats were still there.
But yeah, no place I would ever want to be, that's for sure.
So in Carriacou, there is a bunch of boats tied up in the mangroves, and that ended, and they have a small boatyard there as well, and that is really where the storm landed, like, I don't know, Carriacou, Union Island, whatever, but Carriacou is what we're familiar with, and they got hit really hard. Ton of boats in the mangrove, some boats flipped over like we talked about, bunch of boats just dragged and kind of on top of each other, bunch of boats in the boat yards that fell off their stands, were on top of each other, some flipped over, so just ton of damage and havoc in there. And one thing that I don't think I would have guessed that happened was there were a few boats that caught on fire, at least the ones in the mangroves.
Did you find out how that?
Well, one of them was this lady I met the other day who her Manta 40 was flipped over and her boat caught on fire, and I think her boat was the start of the fire, and I was like, oh, how do you think it happened? She's like, I honestly don't know, but I think that maybe when it flipped over, like, fuel leaked out. I think I had some gasoline in one of my wet lockers.
So the fire started after it flipped.
Yeah, that's what she was thinking. So she was thinking there was flammable fuel around, and then I'm sure, like, I mean, these boats flipped over, there's a lot of electrical wires and stuff in the water, so all it takes is some spilt fuel and a spark, and that's how it started, and it sounded like it might have spread to some other boats, but...
Gosh, I didn't even have that fear. Okay, we're stuck on the boat, a tornado comes through, we flip over. Yeah, we hit our head, I can get you out, but now I have to worry about this fire starting? Oh, good lord.
Billy had asked me a couple times before we got down here when we were rushing and dealing with this expensive insurance and all this stuff. Should we have just gone north? It would have been a lot cheaper. Should we have just gone north? And I was like, no, like, we need to go see more of the world. And now I'm thinking I never want to be anywhere where hurricanes come ever again.
Like, we could have been in New England. We could have saved...
So you don't like that? Coulda, shoulda, woulda.
$8,000 on insurance. We could have saved a lot of stress.
We're gonna make a lot of memories.
Alright. Well, on that note, I think we gotta eat some lunch.
Wrap it up, but did we learn anything else?
We learned a lot, people.
Okay. Well, I guess that's all. Feel free to put your comments below. Do you agree with us? Do you disagree with us?
Let us know how you like this kind of thing. We'll release this as a podcast, but also its own YouTube video. And this is like the first of this kind that we've put like on our channel.
And yeah, Billy just talked a lot about the boats in Carriacou and how much they struggled, but the land, guys, and the land in Petite Martinique is,
and
I think,
and Union Island and some
all
of
of the Grenadines,
yeah.
honestly. Like they say, at least Carriacou and Petite Martinique are 98% completely 100, like completely devastated. I'm pretty sure my Rube was 100%, all the buildings completely destroyed. So they need a lot of help. Again, those links will be below if you have any money to spare, anything you want to donate. We'll put lots of different links here and the links to the t-shirt fundraiser. And thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you guys so... I get a little teary. When I think about how many people messaged us, worried about us, concerned about us, sending good vibes and prayers and everything, it could have been really bad.
Yeah, it could have been really bad. It was really bad for
so many people.
We talked this whole time about like our situation, what we learned and everything like that, and
at the end of the day, we were just so lucky. Like, we were as prepared as we could have been, but we were so lucky.
Yeah, we were very lucky. We're very fortunate overall. And a lot of people weren't as fortunate or as lucky. So we're definitely thinking of them, definitely trying to help them in the best ways that we can, with your guys' help also.
So we felt your love the whole time. Thanks for being here. Sorry to end on tears.